What's up, guys? Kaiji King 5000 here, and today we'll be reacting to the disturbing case of the Hollywood Ripper. I guess is what it's called. So this is by Reganbot. This person makes pretty good videos that are interesting and pretty disturbing actually. I've seen all of the videos of the what's it called stories from our disturbing world. There's only 5 so far, which I'm sure pretty soon there's gonna be more episodes. But I've seen all those episodes, and all those episodes got me so scared, and they were really disturbing. Like, oh my god, like the stories that were on there were just really fucking disturbing. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy this video. I'm sorry, no. Let's get on to the reaction, shall we?
This video is sponsored by Raycon. So it goes without saying that these days our screen time has definitely skyrocketed.
Yep.
Personally, I've been making an effort to change that, and Raycon's everyday E25 earbuds have been my go-to tool to get my eyeballs away from screens. Like I've said before, the E25s are great for stuff like exercising, tuning the roll.
I don't ever wear AirPods only because I feel like I love to ride my bike outside and such, I like to exercise and wear my headphones and all, but I don't ever wear AirPods only because I feel like if I was running or outside, whatever, if they fall out, they might get lost or broken easily. But when you have like a long wired headphone kind of thing, they can't get lost because they're connected to the wire. And yeah, so I don't use AirPods, even though they are fancier and they're cooler. I just don't use AirPods because I don't want them to get lost or broken, something like that. If they're not connected to my phone or have a wire, basically, you know what I mean.
Out while on the bus, etc. But sometimes it's also a good idea to just take a moment to disconnect from the news and all the other chaos that we might be scrolling through. Whether it's
That's
a
true.
meditation,
That's true.
podcast, or an educational audiobook, these earbuds will not let you down, especially considering their 6 hours of playtime,
They look
smooth
nice. I won't
Bluetooth
lie.
pairing, and noise isolating fit. If you're interested in saving your eyes and or your sanity, then you can also save 15% by heading over to
Wow,
buyraycon.com
15%.
rainbot.
Just
Again,
for
that's
saving my eyes and my
buyraycon.com
sanity.
rainbot for 15% off your first order. And with that said, let's begin. Tonight's case begins with a 23-year-old Ashton Kutcher. At this point, Kutcher had become a household name given his standout role as Kelso from That 70s Show, and by all accounts, things...
I was gonna say, that guy looks familiar. I haven't seen that show. I've seen maybe parts of it, but not like the show, really. Well, I was gonna say, that guy looks familiar, and that's probably why.
Seemed to be looking up for the young star. On the evening of February 21st, 2001, however, things changed. Kutcher was set to attend a Grammys after party with his then girlfriend, 22-year-old fashion student Ashley Ellerin. The pair planned to meet up at approximately 8 p.m., but Kutcher was running late. At about 7:30, he called Ashley's residence to let her know that he wasn't going to make it on time, only to be called back instead by Ashley's roommate, who told Kutcher not to worry since Ashley was still getting ready herself. Around 8:24 p.m., Ashton called again just to make sure that their plans for that night were still on, this time speaking to Ashley directly. All seemed to be going as planned minus the timing issue, but when Kutcher called again at around 10 p.m. to let Ashley know he was en route, he for some reason received no answer.
Oh.
Roughly half an hour later, Kutcher arrived at Ashley's place, and still not having heard back from her, simply knocked on her door. Again, no answer. At this point, the young man assumed that Ashley was angry at him for being late. Maybe she just wasn't answering the door, or maybe she even decided to go out with her roommate instead.
Even if that's true, why would she do that? I mean, she should have just given a heads up or something like that. That's not really a good excuse to say. And if you were mad, then you gotta let them know that you are mad, because they're not gonna know themselves that the person's mad at them and such. So, I'm just saying.
Despite the lights being left on. By this point, the two were newly established, and it was safe to assume that anyone would be annoyed if their date turned up several hours later than planned. So, at the time, this didn't seem like all that big of a deal. As one last check, Ashton peered into Ashley's window, and that's when he saw something a bit peculiar.
Oh no.
He saw what appeared to be spilt red wine on the carpet. Again, this was odd, but not necessarily anything alarming, especially given that the neighborhood was relatively crime free. With Ashley nowhere in sight,
If I saw that, I'll be concerned. I don't care if it's like a safe. Actually, realistically, nowhere on Earth is safe really, because there's always dangers and such and things that can kill you or hurt you and stuff like that. I don't care if the neighborhood is good. There's still always that one bad egg, basically, if that makes sense. And if I saw that, I would be concerned because like why would there be spilled wine on the floor, basically, or anything that's spilled or broken, I'll be concerned and probably like look more into that. Maybe call the cops if I have to, or check it out myself if it was my girlfriend, basically. So yeah.
Kutcher decided to leave, and maybe that was for the best. Had Kutcher somehow found his way in that night, he would have happened upon a gruesome discovery.
Oof.
The next morning, at approximately 9 a.m., Ashley's roommate, who'd spent the night away, returned home, and that's when she found Ashley, or rather, Ashley's body.
Oh.
She was lying on the floor just outside the entrance of the bathroom, covered in multiple stab wounds, her blood pooling on the floor and soaking into the carpet. By 9:28 a.m., Ashley Ellerin was pronounced dead.
That's
Needless to
sad.
say, this visceral crime shook the upper echelons of LA, to whom this sort of thing usually never happened. And naturally, the connection to a celebrity only made this.
Once again, I say that everywhere you go, there's always that one bad egg, and that pretty much nowhere on Earth is safe, except heaven. But that's actually no, that sounded really dark. Holy shit! I didn't mean to say it like that. Okay, no, but like, yeah, everywhere you go, it's not safe. Even if there's many good people in the neighborhood, maybe the neighborhood's beautiful, people there are nice. Then there's never an actual safe place. That's why we have locks on the door. Locks. That's why we have weapons to protect ourselves. That's why we have to work out more to fight for our lives, basically. So, yeah, it's because the world is a dangerous and cold place.
Story bigger. What made this even more shocking was that they had no idea who was responsible, and there weren't any signs of forced entry. Keep in mind, Kutcher saw nothing he considered to be out of the ordinary, even though, chillingly, what he mistook for spilled wine was actually his girlfriend's blood.
Oh,
As the years went by, Ashley's
see?
family would plead for answers that felt like they'd never come. One year after another would pass, with still no answers being brought forward as to who was responsible for this.
Don't tell me this
Nearly
murderer
a
gets away with it
decade
again.
would pass, and then suddenly, a breakthrough. One that would unfortunately come at a grim cost. This section of the story brings us to Santa Monica, California, 2008, roughly 25 miles away and 8 years after Ashley's death. There, at around 10:30 p.m., a 26-year-old woman by the name of Michelle Murphy had gone to bed, but not long after, she found herself awake and struggling for her life.
What?
An unknown male in a hoodie and baseball cap was on top of her,
Oh.
plunging a knife into her chest, shoulders, arms, and just about anywhere else he could before Murphy managed to kick him off. For whatever reason, this made the attacker give up, pleading "I'm sorry" as he fled the scene. Michelle was severely injured and undoubtedly mentally
That's
scarred,
crazy.
but would ultimately survive this ordeal. And when it came time for authorities to investigate, they realized that they had the attempted killer's DNA.
Oh,
He
that's
managed
good.
to accidentally
That's
cut
good.
himself during the assault, and this was more than enough for police to pin down their perp. Several
Good.
weeks later, a 32-year-old air conditioner repairman by the name of Michael Thomas Gargiulo was arrested for the attempted murder of Michelle Murphy. And once she'd heard that name, she came to a shocking realization
What?
that would ultimately help expose the scope of Gargiulo's crimes. As it turns out, Michelle knew this man. She just didn't realize it the night of the attack.
What?
The two were actually neighbors. When looking
Oh,
into
see?
Gargiulo's residence,
I fucking told you. I fucking say it, and I will say it again. Even though it's a good neighborhood, it's beautiful and all, there's always that one bad egg, and this guy was a neighbor. I fucking told you. There's never ever a good place on the earth.
residential history,
Told
a disturbing
you.
trend became
Fucking told
apparent.
you.
It seemed that wherever the man moved, a woman nearby would end up mysteriously murdered in cold blood. And yes, that does include Ashley Ellerin. Back in
Oof.
2001, Gargiulo actually lived near Ashley and even knew her. The two met when Gargiulo helped Ashley with a flat tire, after which he left her his business card for his AC repair services. This familiarity, many assume, is why there weren't any signs of forced entry.
Oof.
Ashley knew this man, and presumably opened the door when he knocked.
That makes
Interestingly
sense.
enough, Gargiulo was actually named as a person of interest by Ashley's friends, who referred to him as, quote, Mike the Furnace Man. This, however, was not enough to get him caught. Now, of course, as I just mentioned, Ashley and Michelle Murphy weren't Gargiulo's only two victims. Back in 2005, Gargiulo was still living in the confines of Los Angeles when he noticed a new female neighbor who moved in nearby. Her name was Maria Bruno, a 35-year-old mother of four who was unfortunately living alone following a family separation.
Oof.
On the night of December 15th, 2005, Maria was stabbed to death by Gargiulo in her sleep, and her body
Aw.
subsequently mutilated. At the time of the initial investigation, there once again seemed to be little to go off of in terms of evidence or clues, as all that was found at the scene was a blue surgical slipper stained with Maria's blood. Years
Jeez.
later, similar footwear would be uncovered. According to CBS's 48 Hours, after Gargiulo's arrest, a search of his property revealed more of the blue slippers, something the man apparently wore while on the job as a repairman. Now, this
Blue
brings us back to
slippers.
Gargiulo's first victim, but unlike the others mentioned so far, this story does not take place in California. It's believed that the now dubbed Hollywood Ripper actually got his start back home in Chicago. In 1993, an 18-year-old high school student by the name of Trisha Bacascio was spending a night out with friends before separating from the group at approximately 1 a.m. Trisha was supposed to be going back home, but she never made it there alive. The next morning, she was found dead at the front steps of her family home, her body
Aw.
covered in multiple stab wounds. As you already guessed,
That's fucked up.
Gargiulo did know Tracy. In fact, the two were neighbors, and he drove her to a friend's house the night before, and because of this was actually questioned by police during the initial stages of the investigation, but in the end, he was let free. Although
What?
already formally charged for the murders of Ashley Eller and Maria Bruno and the attempted murder of Michelle Murphy, Gargiulo was still technically off the hook for the murder of Trisha Bacascio. That is until 2011.
Oh.
Following the 48 Hours episode on the Hollywood Ripper, some former coworkers of Gargiulo came forward recounting a rather strange statement made by the man in the 2000s when he worked as a bouncer in West Hollywood. The men were goofing off and asked each other if they'd ever killed a person, to which Gargiulo said he had. He mentioned murdering a woman and leaving her, quote, on the steps for dead. This
Jeez.
was obviously taken as a joke at the time and never.
That's not a good joke to say, people, especially not in this damn time. Why would you joke about killing people? That's what I don't get. Like, in TV shows and animation and stuff like that, if a person dies, if it's in a funny way, like South Park kind of thing, yeah, that's funny. But like, you don't like go with your friends and say, "Hey, you ever killed someone? You ever stabbed anyone or anything like that?" No, that's not. That's not a good or appropriate joke. It's just not really. It's
Reported.
disturbing.
Now, I should add that back in 2003, local authorities had reopened Trisha's case and decided to gather DNA samples for their investigation. Gargiulo's DNA was in fact a match for DNA found under Trisha's fingernails, but shockingly enough, this still was not enough to pin him down.
How?
According to Oxygen, quote, the Cook County State Attorney's Office declined to indict Gargiulo for the murder, citing that his DNA could have been transferred to Trisha through casual contact when they were together in the car before her death.
It doesn't matter if if it could be anything else. It's still a witness, not witness. It's still someone who may have been involved with the killing. Like, why would you leave him off the hook just because you think you didn't do it, or you think that it could have been another thing? No, if there's no lead, if there's no one else that's like connected to the death other than him, then it has to be him. You know, it's the DNA was in her fingernails, and why would the DNA even be in her fingernails? What I'm seeing right now is that like she probably struggled and probably scratched her maybe, and that's probably how his DNA got in her fingernails. So this doesn't make any sense.
Now, that is obviously frustrating, but once
It is
Gargiulo was
frustrating.
exposed as the Hollywood Ripper, his DNA, plus the testimony from his former coworkers, was too much to be ignored. And in 2011, he was formally charged for the murder of Trisha Bocascio. Keep in mind, I said charged and not convicted, but
Oh
let
my
me
god.
clarify that. Gargiulo wouldn't be found guilty for the murders of Maria Bruno and Ashley Ellerin until another decade later, finally being formally convicted of his crimes in California following a 2019 trial in which Ashton Kutcher was heavily involved
2019.
as a witness. As things stand right now, Gargiulo is still awaiting sentencing and will ultimately have to face another trial back in Illinois.
It's 2021. The trial was in 2019, and you're telling me he's still awaiting for his sentence? Come on now. This whole thing is frustrating. Like, this guy got away with so many things for over a decade, and you guys had all the proof and evidence that you had, but for some reason you just thought otherwise. Like, what if this and that kind of thing? No, that's that's just fucked up, really. And he should be on death row for doing that shit.
But the time frame for that is up in the air, with no one really knowing when it'll happen.
He
One can
still
only
did it.
hope
You don't
that
have to
this
know
leads to a
when. He still
formal
did it.
conviction for Trisha's death, even if we're already almost 3 whole decades past it.
It's still
This video
it's
was edited by Darkfire Productions.
even if it happened a long time ago, it's still a crime. It doesn't matter when it happened or how long it took place. It's still a fucking crime. He still murdered someone. Jesus fucking Christ.
Written and researched by Lux Noctis.
Is it over? Yeah, it's over. So anyway, that was an interesting video. Um, it was frustrating. It was confusing, but I don't know. Sometimes the world is just stupid because, like, if I was like the judge or something like that, I would sentence him to death row for murdering all those women and shit, and like it's stupid how they let him off like a decade, like before he was convicted of murder. It's crazy how they interview him. They interview him. I'm sorry, interviewed him, interview him, interview. They interview him, and they had DNA connected to the one of his victims and shit. But for some reason, he was still off the hook. And today, he's still waiting for his trial. How does that make any sense? I don't. That's why I don't understand. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Ciao.